2. Whoo!
Welcome to the Authenticity Lab, a podcast where we celebrate the journey of reconnecting with our authentic selves. I'm Dr. Kelsey Miles. I'm a musician, a songwriter, and also a chemistry professor. And I'm so excited that you are here. Each week, I'll share a new story and break it down into a small yet very powerful life experiment that you can run yourself. And this is going to help you live more boldly, lead with curiosity, and embrace what truly makes you who you are. Are you ready? Let's dive into today's episode. We are shining a light on the parts of ourselves that we keep hidden. These are our secrets, our fears, our passions. You know that thing you have that you hide from other people. Well, guess what? We're talking about it in this episode. And one of the things I hope that you could find through the episode is that when you hide this from others, what's also happening is you are not fully embracing it within yourself. You see, I've got a story that I'm going to share with you about how I hid part of myself. And this has taken me probably around 10 years to really start to embrace this as part of me. What we're going to do by the end of the episode, so make sure you stick around till the end, I'm going to share a life experiment you can run in your own life to make that first step to start to create momentum so that you can start to shine a light on these parts that you hide. When I picked up the guitar, my life completely shifted. I found this outlet that was unlike anything I had done before. No amount of journaling or therapy helped me organize my thoughts and organize the things that happened in my life like guitar did. I didn't grow up in a musical family, so this was the very first instrument I had ever picked up. And when you pick up something as an adult, it has a different flavor to it. Like when you're a kid and you pick up a new passion, it then makes sense that you can revisit it as an adult and it doesn't feel like a big thing. This was nuts to me at the time. At the time I was in graduate school, I was focused fully on chemistry. I had been spending about 80 hours a week in lab, working my tail off, avoiding some of the things that I knew I needed to work on, which I had left this controlling relationship. When I picked up guitar, I learned 3 chords. I remember learning 3 chords. I was using YouTube. I took one group lesson and then I started to use YouTube and I couldn't stop trying to learn and practice. Every morning I would wake up and I'd start playing my guitar every morning. So much so that instead of me going to the lab and working the 80 hours a week I had been doing, I started to pull back on my time in the lab. And every morning, I would have to force myself essentially to get into lab to go work. It was as if this big shift had happened. However, I felt so great about it. I had found this outlet that spoke to me. This was this passionate outlet. I remember when I was growing up, my father always told me, you either have it or you don't. And I never believed him until I picked up guitar. I always thought I could practice and get good at something. It didn't matter what it was. And to some extent, practice is absolutely necessary. And also, some people just have rhythm and some don't. Some are tone deaf and some are not. And for some reason, when I picked up the guitar and I learned 3 chords, I was playing and singing at the same time and writing music. I remember I thought everyone could do this. I really did. Now, I told you that today's episode was going to be a story about hiding things. And I want to paint the picture so you understand where I was at with this. If you know any graduate students, you might be aware of the culture in academic settings, and especially in science settings. I can't speak for all academic settings, but in chemistry in particular, it is very much so accepted that you will fully pour your life in. Often you'll hear about graduate students after getting their degrees going into a post-PhD depression because they have just poured everything into this degree. And then once they graduate, it's as if everything catches up to them. And so in the world of getting my PhD in chemistry, it was a well-known fact that you pour everything into it. Sure, you can have small hobbies on the side, but this passion that I found for writing and for playing my guitar was way more than a small hobby that would have been acceptable. And I remember vividly every morning I would jump out of bed, eagerly waiting to go play my guitar. I would sit on my floor in my bedroom for hours, just playing and practicing and learning new chords and putting songs together. And it was so invigorating and so healing. I wrote some of my first songs on the floor in my bedroom, and I remember just crying when certain lyrics would come through. And it was such a beautiful time every day that I would spend. And I had to like pull myself and drag myself into lab to get back to work. And it became such a big part of me in my mornings that I would really start to feel off when I went into lab because I knew I couldn't talk about it. At least I felt like I couldn't. My colleagues, it's not like they had said anything that would make me think that. It was just the environment of where I was at, right? You know, when you decide to go get your PhD, it's because you're very dedicated to wanting to learn that. And I felt like I was kind of cheating by finding this other passion, or it found me really. And it was this thing that I hid. I didn't let people know I was doing it. I kept playing. This happened for a while where I kept it to myself. And I remember making up excuses some mornings when I was much later than I really should have been coming in the lab and making up some excuse as to why I wasn't there. And it got to a point where I started to play out. This is when I started to go to open mics and jams. And so in the morning, I would have my time with my guitar. I would pull myself to go into lab, hide it from everyone I was around. And then at the end of my lab day, I wouldn't stay really late. I would go ahead and leave and I'd go to an open mic and I'd start to meet people in the music world. It was the most fun. It was the most fun. But I started to live kind of these two lives where I was hiding this part of myself from the chemistry world that I was in. And it got to a place where in the morning I would do guitar, right? And then at night I would be playing music and I'd eagerly wake up the next morning. And it got to the point where I really started to ask myself, why am I so afraid? Why am I hiding this, right? Why am I hiding this? This brings me to the first step of the scientific method, which is to ask a question. And my question was, what would happen if I shared this with one of my colleagues and I let them know that I had this passion that I was doing? The next step of the scientific method is to form a hypothesis. And I really, really thought that if I shared this, I would be viewed, people wouldn't take me as seriously. I loved and still love chemistry, and I really thought that I would be taken less seriously in chemistry. This is a complicated topic, and we'll get into it in another episode, but when you are a woman in a mainly male-led field, it's one of those you have to be really careful about because there are some things that inhibit your ability to be successful. And so to consciously share a passion that was outside of chemistry was one route that I really wasn't interested in going on. But at the same time, I couldn't help but feel that tug at my heart, knowing that I was going into lab and couldn't really make great relationships because I was hiding part of myself, and people can tell. So my hypothesis was that if I shared, people would take me less seriously. Another side of my hypothesis was that maybe I would find a closer friend in graduate school and, maybe I would connect with someone more. And so this brings us to step number 3 of the scientific method, which is to run the experiment, no matter how terrifying it is. And so I did. I shared this with a colleague that I had started to form a friendship with. And I told him, what I was doing and kind of the progression of how I picked up guitar and the story and all that. And we had just the best conversation about it. I remember being in the break room talking. And this takes us to step number 4, which is to make an observation. Let me tell you what, when you share something that you hide from other people, there's a little bit, at least this is what I observed for me, there's something inside of me that just went, yay! It was just very much so celebratory. No matter how terrifying it is, when it's your truth and you share it, there's always this part that celebrates for you. And that's what happened. That was one of the things I observed, in that no matter how terrifying it was to share, and I didn't know the repercussions of it, that happened. The other observation I made was that this person then opened up to me. And so in a way, I invited a stronger relationship, and we're friends to this date. And our relationship grew tremendously because of this opening. This takes us to step 5 in the scientific method, which is to analyze your data. And as I looked at everything, so I ran my experiment, I shared this with a colleague of this passion of mine that every morning I would, wake up and start writing songs, and it was more than a hobby, and it was really just this beautiful thing in my life. What was really cool about that conversation with them is they shared with me that they actually played some bass in a band. And so then we started to talk about music, and then we started to talk about the effect of music. And this conversation, when I analyzed this data, my sharing, my hidden part actually opened up this whole new world in a relationship that we started to build this great friendship. And if I hadn't had done that, if I hadn't done the experiment, there's no way we would have become friends the way that we did. And another thing I noticed as I zoom out a little bit, when I shared that with them, what I noticed is the effect it had on every interaction I had, not only with them, but everyone. Because I wasn't walking around with this secret, I had a part of myself that celebrated that she said it out loud. When you decide to share a hidden part of yourself, it's just lighter. You just walk around lighter. You don't have to have that wall up, and because you don't want to slip and say something about it, right? And when you share something that's hidden, it makes every interaction that I had after that was better, which meant that I was professionally doing better than I was even before. I didn't have that sinking feeling walking around with this hidden secret of mine. Even though not everyone around me knew about it, I didn't have to carry that weight. I felt more confident. I walked around a little lighter, definitely because of this. One of the things I also found when I was analyzing this is that When we hide things from other people, at least this is the case for me. And maybe you'll find some truth in it as well. When I hid this from other people, it was because I wasn't fully embracing it myself. You see, when I do something in life that I fully accept, it doesn't feel weird to me to share, right? It doesn't feel like I shouldn't share because I love it about myself. It's when I haven't fully accepted it as part of me that then makes me worried to share it. I know at the time of this story that I'm sharing with you, at the time, I really blamed the situation I was in. It was because I was in chemistry, a grad student in chemistry, and the people I was around, can understand hobbies, but what I was doing wasn't quite a hobby. It was way bigger. And it was an easy out, to kind of say it was just because of the situation. But the truth is that I also hadn't fully accepted it because I was in that academic mindset that it's not okay to have, this big other passion, that you should be fully focused on this. This experiment was definitely not easy to run. I could have done it differently. I could have just worked on accepting this hidden part in myself first, and then it would have been an easy transition to share it with others and to feel lighter immediately. But at the time, I didn't see it that way. And I really needed this flavor, I guess, of an experiment to share it externally. And then I was just so lucky that that person didn't judge me. I do want to share another thing, that if that person had judged me, I know that the feeling, that immediate observation I made of feeling lighter and having that part of me celebrate that I shared it, it wouldn't have mattered if they judged me or not. I still would have had that spark. I still would have had that internal excitement of acceptance of myself. And I share that because that might be useful for your life experiment that I'm going to give you for this week. Okay, this takes us to the final step, though, in which I share my results and the conclusion I had. And a really cool thing happened after I did this. So I remember sharing this with my colleague, and then I remember feeling lighter in the lab around everyone. And I then started to have better conversations with people. And when I shared my results, meaning my result from this was that I didn't need to hide so much, and then I could start to accept that this is something that I love to do. And when I started to share this out loud a little bit more, what happened was I started to develop some friendships and had conversations with people who sought me out, literally sought me out to have a conversation about their concerns as well. So let me share one. So for example, there was a colleague of mine that we had this conversation, and they opened up to me about how they didn't want to finish their PhD. They just wanted to end with a master's. And that conversation would be very, very difficult to have with most people getting their PhD because, it's like talking to a colleague who wants to quit the job you're working at. That's a tough conversation to have. And in a way, because I had shared my results of, hey, I hid this thing, but it's like, it's part of me. What happened was then I started to build other relationships, and then I actually helped some other people navigate kind of that thought process of doing something that is not fully accepted in the academic world. Because I had started that momentum of sharing the part that I was hiding, it really opened myself up. It really opened myself up to new relationships, which was cool. Another part of my sharing the results is this podcast, of course. And I am so grateful that I get to do this, and that it's been years in the works, that I'm so happy that I am finally sharing some of these stories and these methods that I have used. And this takes us to the part of the episode where I invite you to do your life experiment. I want you to consider, what's something that you keep hidden from other people? Now, you don't have to do the life experiment where you go and you tell somebody, all right? But I'd like for you to consider, what is something that, I don't know, maybe you don't like about yourself. Maybe whatever it is, it's a secret, it's a passion, it's something that you hide from others. It could be for an external reason, like mine was for graduate school and academia. That wasn't a really well accepted thing for you to have something outside of chemistry that was more than a hobby. A hobby was fine. One hobby was fine, but mine was much bigger than that. I really want you to think about this after the end of the episode. Maybe take a moment, and I want you to hypothesize what that looks like. What that looks like if you were to share your hidden part. What would that feel like? What would that feel like if you accepted it within yourself more? And I want you to design an experiment. And this is something this is really important actually for us to talk about in depth. Designing a good experiment. So when I designed my experiment in this story, I shared my hidden part with a colleague that I'd already had a rapport with. We'd already had great conversations. The door was kind of open. I didn't think he was going to judge me, and he didn't. My hypothesis was correct. When you do a terrifying life experiment, something that's stepping out of your comfort zone, and really any experiment you do, even in the science world, what we always do is we try to assess the risk, and you want to lower the risk as much as possible. One way we do that is personal protective equipment with like lab goggles. We might also not use as dangerous of a chemical. You might also not use as high of a temperature, things like that. We can lower the risk of the experiment. And that's exactly what I want you to do this week. I want you to think about an experiment that isn't a big risk, okay? We're not trying to create chaos in our life with these experiments. We're just taking the next step to create some good momentum in a direction that helps us become more of ourselves, all right? So when you think about the experiment you want to run, perhaps this week you just start with reflecting on something you hide and see if you can find some acceptance from within, and be able to reflect or journal about it and telling yourself that this is something that I actually love that I do this. Or I love this piece about me. Or I love that I have this thing I'm interested in doing or I haven't done, And that could be your experiment. The other thing you could do is find a friend that maybe feels like a low risk to share it with. But don't create tons of chaos. Don't do a really, really risky experiment. The next step you're going to do is you're going to make an observation after you run this experiment. Maybe your hypothesis is right. Maybe you feel a little lighter, or maybe they judge you when you tell them. Either way, an observation is just an observation of the data. It's when we get to step 5 to analyze the data. This is when you're going to start to put your opinions back in about what you liked and what you didn't like. Maybe you'll find something within there that you do like. Whatever it is, it might cause more questions to come up for you about this hidden part. You shared it with this person. Now you learn something about them. Maybe you actually find out that the reason that you've been hiding it is because the person that you would like to develop a relationship with wasn't accepting of the thing you were hiding. So in a way, you just learned something about them that you kind of thought was there, but now you have data on it. And when you then go to step number 6, which is to draw your conclusion and share your results, I would love for you to share it with us in the community at kelseymiles.com/thelab. That's THELAB. And it is free to subscribe. I have posted some forums on there. So if you've done episode 1, 2, or now 3, your life experiment, you can share it and we can start to bounce ideas back and forth and see how it's going for everyone. So I invite you to share your results there. You can also share them with yourself or by journaling or with another trusted friend, maybe someone who already knows that hidden part about yourself. There's one last thing I'd like to share. The hidden parts of ourselves. the parts that we hide from others, and also to some degree don't fully accept within ourselves. These little gremlins, let me tell you what, they don't go away immediately. This life experiment I'm asking you to do, it's not going to solve everything. What this week's life experiment will do, though, is it will create a step in the right direction and create some momentum for you to start to accept that this is just part of you and there's nothing wrong with it. There's literally nothing wrong with you. If you haven't heard someone tell you that today, now you've heard it. There is absolutely nothing wrong with you. And I wish I had always had that statement in my head, and I didn't until more recently. And one of the things I want to share about this whole thing that you hide, it's taken me probably around 10 years to fully accept this within myself, that it's okay that I am a chemist and I am also a musician. That sounds like such a simple thing for me to accept with me saying it right now. But I gotta tell you, it has taken me years to integrate this understanding, to integrate every little life experiment I ran. And I still come across some limitations and some people who aren't accepting of it or who do judge me for it. And I'll tell you what, when I fully accepted it within myself, the judgment I received from others had less of an impact on me. Now, it still had an impact because I'm still a human and I, like you, am still trying to, be fully myself. That's still a thing I'm will always be on this journey. And I share this, though, to encourage you that no matter how big of a life experiment, whatever step you take, it's not the end all be all. The experiment never has to be perfect. You don't have to learn and have this huge shift, in order for it to all be okay. We're just taking the next step. And that's why I am dedicated to show up every week to invite you to do life experiments, because these are things that require consistency and small steps all the time. I'd like to end the episode with a little bit from my song, Shadow. This song, Shadow, is all about those hidden parts that we have. And let me share some more of the lyrics. This is from my I Am Lyrical Journey. And this is chapter 2 in my journal. So Shadow, these are my favorite lyrics from this song. It's in the bridge of the song. You don't have to hide. You judge yourself and you do it again until you realize, here it is, this is my favorite lyric. Darkness leads you to the light. You don't have to do this alone.
You don't have to hide. You judge yourself and you do it again until you realize darkness leads you to the light. You don't have to do this alone.
The thing that you hide actually brings you to the light. And that line, darkness leads you to the light, the idea behind that lyric is that when I worked through me hiding music from the people I was around, when I worked through that, it brought me closer to myself. It brought me closer to me. This takes us to the end of the episode. I want to thank you so much for joining me. And I'm so grateful that you are here. Again, I invite you to join the community at kelseymiles.com/thelab. If you enjoyed this podcast, I would be so appreciative if you would share this with someone that you think might also need to hear this or have the little push about the thing that they're hiding. And know that they aren't alone in it either. And darkness always brings you to the light. If you're interested in the song, Shadow is its name. It is the second song on my album, I Am. And if you are subscribed to my website, I have the lyrical video posted, so you can also see the lyrics to that. If you're interested, I do have my I Am lyrical journal. If you love lyrics and love journaling, this is a great asset to have. It takes you through each one of the songs. And this chapter 2 is so fun. Fun? Is fun the right word? Probably not. It's hard. I'll be back next week with a new story and also a new life experiment that will inspire you to live boldly, lead with curiosity, and keep being your amazing, authentic self.
Yeah, that house will always call you.